Having the right mindset and the right methods for practicing your speech can make the difference between your audience scrolling through Twitter and hanging onto your every word, giving you a standing ovation at the end of your speech. There's an intrinsic, away motivation for practicing your public speaking. Nobody wants to look foolish in front of other people. I mean, I don't care if your audience is made up of friends or strangers. Nobody wants to bomb. However, worry and anxiety rarely helps, and Deepak Chopra says that the best use of imagination is creativity. The worst use of imagination is anxiety. So let's stop worrying about bombing on stage and let's do something about it. I love public speaking because of how I change when I practice. Every time you practice your speech, you get immediate feedback about yourself. Imagine as you're practicing that you're crafting your words and delivery in a way that will shape how you present yourself to others. Truly, with practice, you're a different person for others, a better speaker than before. So, I want to give you a different motivation for practicing. With each practice, you're more comfortable with your content and your delivery. Others will see you differently as a speaker, and you'll see yourself differently. It's like a positive feedback loop that builds on itself. Every verb is a vote for a noun. Every time that you practice, you shape your identity as a better speaker. I began running at an early age. I used to run from the living room to the kitchen. I'd run to the car when I was a toddler. Maybe I was running because every one of my steps was half a step of someone else's. But it wasn't until my late 20s that I committed to running a marathon and I practiced and I ran every day. Now I've run 3 marathons and I've completed a triathlon. I'm a runner. When did I become a runner? When I committed to the practice. Tiny changes done repeatedly add up to a powerful transformation. Let me make a distinction. Once I made stir fry. I'm not a chef. Once I shot a gun at a bird. I'm not a hunter. Do you see the difference? So when you commit to practicing and giving a speech, you become a speaker. You are supposed to be there. And unless you've pushed a flight attendant over and grabbed the intercom, someone has invited you to speak. People expect that you'll speak clearly, that you'll remember each point of your speech, that you'll be dynamic and entertaining or thought-provoking, and they'll want to applaud when you're done. How do I know this? Because you're a speaker, and that's what speakers do. So let's drop the fear of bombing, and let's assume the role of the speaker. There are no born speakers, only those who develop their craft with practice. In this video, we're going to talk about practicing, and I'm going to share with you my 9 routines for speech practice. Now, I don't do this with every speech, but for a keynote or one that I'm given time to prepare for, I follow these steps. Tip number 1, start early. Here's a challenge for you. Write your first rough draft for the speech within 24 hours of it being assigned to you. If you do this, you are starting on a win. You need time to get perspective about your speech. You need time to think about your audience and have some of the nuances that's going to change a speech from being good to great to excellence. I recommend having a day in between each of the practice days that you'd have for your speech. Oftentimes, I'll look at what I wrote yesterday or what I've practiced the day before, and I'll say, gosh, I bet I thought that was going to be funny at the time, because it's not now. Let's leave that out. If it stands the test of time, then you should keep it. What I do is I write out my speech word for word within the first 24 hours of receiving the assignment. Then I take a break from my speech and take some time to allow my subconscious to work on it and come up with great ideas that I might not have thought of. I can come back to it a day later. Then, after I've taken a day away, I'm going to start to research some more about my speaking topic and my speaking venue. I'm going to want to know what my time constraints are. That way I can figure out how much I need to cut or how much I need to add to my speech. Another thing that you're going to want to know at this early stage is who is in your audience. What can you learn about them? What do they already know that you may not want to say because it's redundant? What will be the personality of the event? Is there a possibility that you can ask questions of the audience members before the speech day. Then at this early stage, I complete one of my most important steps. I ask myself the question, what do I want them to think, say, or do? So now we're a couple of days into speech practicing. You've written a rough draft, you've taken a day off, and you've come back to it and you've started to ask some critical questions about your speech and about your audience. You're starting to revamp, you're cutting, and you're adding. At this point, you're rewriting and you're editing your speech, and you can do this multiple times. I'm going to want to find my main points of my speech, and I'm going to ask myself, how can I set them up quickly? Sometimes when I'm writing a speech out word for word, I give a long introduction to a point. Cut away the extra story that doesn't add value to the punchline of your story or your joke or your quip or whatever it might be. Once I cut out the unnecessary parts, then I can start to add in the portions of my speech that are going to give it a little spice. Add the tiny details, the quips that are fun or funny, things that might add flavor to the speech. Now, at this point, as I'm working on my second or third draft, I'm starting to ask myself the question, how can I craft an experience that's really going to kill, that's going to make a big difference? What can I do that's really going to grab their attention? What happens if you bring an audience member on stage? What would happen if you brought a puppy on stage? Would the audience love it? Would it be inappropriate? Can you think of something outside the box? Is there an audio visual that will really make a difference? Not reading your slides so it's clear, but is there something that you can do that will give it punch? Remember, only add something that's going to kill if it fits. If there's something that's going to be extravagant, but it doesn't fit your speech content, leave it out. Now, at this point, I've got a pretty solid, rough draft of my speech. I've cut words to make it shorter or more concise, and I've added spice to make it fun or to make it relevant to what the speaking topic is about. Your next job is to practice with someone. You'll be amazed how something feels great in your own head, but then it comes out all wrong when you want to say it to somebody else in the room. For a big speech, my wife is my guinea pig, and that keeps me from blundering for the first time in front of a big audience. So find someone that can be gentle, kind, but also critical, that can give you good feedback, that could be an actual audience member and can share with you what they think. After you've practiced with someone comes the next step. Again, rewrite, edit your speech. At this point, you've probably developed your speech to 90%, 95% of the words that you'll give on that day. But remember, 93% of communication is nonverbal, and you've probably only prepared about 20% of your nonverbal communication. How do you want it to sound? One thing you can practice in a speech is your nonverbal signposts. We're going to get into that in future trainings in Unit 5 on nonverbals in the Standing O Speaker series. But you'll notice that if you create a signpost for your audience, telling them nonverbally what you're going to be saying before you say it, it will help them track with you. And great speakers want people tracking with them every moment of their speech. On to the sixth tip. My sixth tip for practicing your speech is memorization. I don't want you to memorize your whole speech. As a matter of fact, that might be a cause for disaster if you lose your place. But it is important to memorize at least your first sentence, if not your whole first paragraph, your concluding paragraph, and any of your transitions. So I memorize my intro, my conclusion, and transitions word for word. That way it will just roll through. And sometimes that might take 5 to 15 times more practice so I can get that down. As Daryl pointed out in one of the previous sections on memorizing, you can memorize your speech through word for word repetition, or through an outline, or through the journey method. I'd recommend that you review that in Unit 3 if you've forgotten things about memorization. What I like to do in my speeches is I reduce my dependency on my script by rewriting a skeletal outline in smaller and smaller form. The smaller the skeleton gets, the more it causes me to have to remember all of the details and points outside of the skeleton. Then all the skeleton provides for me is prompts or cues to help me if I lose my place and to keep me on track. When it comes to the introduction, the conclusion, and the transitions, it takes me sometimes 5 to 15 times to memorize things. I'm thinking more and more about how I want it to sound as I'm practicing. So the sixth tip is Start to make this speech more your own. Get it so that it's well ingrained into your brain. Even if you don't say it word for word, you can deliver the concepts of the content in a way that you feel proud. The seventh tip. Now it's time to practice presenting your main points until you can give them without hesitation. All of your points are going to sink in somewhere between 3 and 15 times of practice, depending on how technical the speech is. When I'm telling a story, it might take me 3 or 4 times to practice it. Telling a joke with a specific punchline might take 5 to 10 times of practicing it. And I'd recommend that you practice it with other people because you want to be able to see how others will respond to your nonverbal communication. You got to get your timing right. You got to be able to work with the cues that other people might give you. So, jokes or different things that you're going to expect the audience to respond to, practice with others. Then, if it comes to a very specific line that maybe you want the audience to remember or repeat back to you, or if there's something that's very technical, you might need more practice sessions than 10 to 15. For an example, I said, tiny changes done repeatedly add up to a powerful transformation. That's something I wanted to practice. Everyone, please forgive this video edit. I was in the middle of editing this video and I recognized that I didn't talk with you about how to avoid hesitation. The key to avoiding hesitation in your speeches is to be able to think 1, 2, 3 points ahead of what you're already speaking. If I'm practiced enough that I can be saying things on autopilot, I can start to think about what it is that I'm going to be saying next. And if I'm able to do that, there's never going to be a time when I hesitate or have to pause for a significant amount of time during my speech. Again, it gets to this freeing up RAM, random access memory in our brain when we're speaking, so that we can be thinking about our nonverbals, what we're going to say next, or what we're going to say in the future. I hope that that adds a little clarity to that point of that 7th mode of practice. Back to it. 2 tips left to go. The 8th tip that I want to give you is to accentuate your nonverbal communication. You know, sometimes you have to get out there to be able to draw an audience to be out there with you, but you don't want to be too out there. But why not practice going big and large and using your hands for different things? If you get excited in a new way, you'll be able to help other people get excited. All of speaking is a transference of feeling, and using extended body movements can help you feel and think differently about how you're going to deliver your speech. So I'll practice things with an exaggerated form. This way, I can also tell what's going to feel too uncomfortable when I need to be more reserved. Helps me to find the right center for when I'm going to speak. Because if I practice being holed up a little bit too much in each of my practice sessions, my speaking is going to come out that way. If I practice being alive and out, my speaking is going to come maybe a little more open. Here's my final tip for practicing, and this is a killer. You should video yourself practicing your speech. Now, if you're going to practice in front of other people, again, that would be fine as you've expressed things more. But realize this, it is going to be a little bit different for an audience of 1 or 2 at this point than an audience of 50, 100, 200, or 500. So you do need to go ahead and be out there and be more expressive for the bigger groups. Consider that as you're practicing on video. Practicing on video allows you to see for yourself how you're really coming across. Practicing this much will allow you to be in the moment when you're talking. You'll be thinking about what you're going to be saying maybe 2 or 3 sentences down the road because it's so ingrained in you that you won't get caught up with what you're saying in a moment. Imagine that this type of practice frees up the RAM, the random access memory in your brain. If you have more RAM, more available RAM, you can do more tasks at one time. This is huge when your audience might be shifting or swaying in one direction and you can read them and react or respond in the moment. With speaking, our problem is that we spend all of our RAM capacity on the words that we're saying. And we don't leave enough capacity for the most important 93% of our communication, the nonverbals. It's the nonverbals that make a speech. The best way to sum up my recommendations for practicing how you speak is by telling you how to present like a professional. If you'd like to deliver like a pro, You must practice like a pro. Get to practice. Until next time, do things that scare you and keep practicing.